Thank you for joining us this day here. Chris Veal, John Ujvari will be presenting for the SBTDC National Conference for Fall 2020. Today's presentation is going to focus on the Small Business Innovation Research Program and specifically assisting technology-focused small business clients to build a compelling business case. So we're going to walk you through a number of very important features that you as business counselors and business advisors should be considering as you're starting to work with early stage companies developing innovative products. So some of the key learnings in today's session are going to be some case studies of client successes that both Chris Veal and I have worked with over the years, who have successfully transitioned from research and development activities to successful business entities. We'll then be speaking about some relevant business components that are required for submitting an SBIR and STTR proposal. And we'll also discuss some common business challenges that SBIR type clients often encounter. And the goal of the session, again, is to help your clients think about business and not just about research and development activities. So again, my name is John Ujvari. I'm an SBIR STTR program advisor and technology commercialization counselor with the North Carolina Small Business and Technology Development Center. I've been with the SBTDC since 2001 in our technology commercialization team. Prior to that, I did my MBA at Wake Forest University, focusing on entrepreneurship. Prior to that, I was in the Washington, D.C. area working at a NIH government subcontractor working on international health studies. And before that, I did my undergrad work at the University of Virginia. We also have with us today Chris Veal, my colleague in our tech commercialization team. I'll turn it over to you, Chris, for an intro.
Hi, thanks, John. As John mentioned, my name is Chris Veal. I am a technology commercialization advisor on John's team with 3 other people with the North Carolina Small Business and Technology Development Center. I'm going to start the other way. I got my career started after graduating from Georgia Tech with an undergraduate degree in engineering and went into R&D for a brief time, long enough to learn that I didn't want to be in it that much anymore. I wanted to be in business, and I went into airport management where I spent the majority of my time. And I learned a lot about business. I actually helped small businesses, airlines, air charters, trying to decide whether or not they wanted to go into business. I guess that was setting me up for my future. I also learned how to listen to customer, learned how to manage large budgets and deal with state and federal grants, which turns out it serves me well now. I also had 2 entrepreneurial ventures. One was a photography business. I'm not that great a photographer, but my wife then was. We could have been successful, but this is one of those situations where you learn about how passion can drive you away from profit at times. And I also had a light construction business, which was a tough row to hoe. So I found this position while looking to teach. And I enjoy coaching. I enjoy the different technologies that we see every day. And I enjoy helping the entrepreneur and getting out there and meeting people doing really exciting things.
So a little bit about the North Carolina Small Business and Technology Development Center. The SBTDC was established back in 1984, and at that time it was the first small business development center to have a T in the middle of its name, and that T stands for the group that Chris and I are part of, which is our Technology Development and Commercialization team. And of course, we focus on working with early stage companies that are developing intellectual property. And those types of clients have unique needs versus the general businesses that the rest of our organization tends to work with. So we are a multi-campus center housed under the University of North Carolina system, and the UNC system has campuses all over the state of North Carolina. And we are located on or near each of those system campuses. We have about 80 staff statewide, including business counselors, specialists, and administrative individuals. The organization works a great deal with students, given our close proximity and connections to both the UNC system as well as private universities like Duke University, Wake Forest University, Elon University. We work with over 300 both graduate and undergraduate and other professional students each year, primarily on client-based projects. So that's a terrific resource that we can bring to our clients that need an extra set of hands as they're developing their businesses. So in addition to our primary role at the SBTDC of helping kind of the Main Street small and medium-sized companies, we have specialty services. Chris and I are part of our tech commercialization team. Also, one of our team members focuses on equity investment, so helping early stage, primarily tech companies, learn about and help them to gain access to equity funding. And within the SBTDC, we also have the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, PTAC, our International Business Development Team, and a few other smaller specialty resource areas. So a very strong organization throughout the state of North Carolina, working toward economic development as it relates to small businesses. So let's get started. First, we're going to talk about two client cases. Again, clients that actually both Chris and I have co-counseled on over probably the last 5, 6, 7 years. So a long history with these two particular clients. And just to let you know that, or as you know, every client case is unique. There is certainly no one size fits all, and that's kind of what makes our job as business counselors very exciting, is that we don't know who's going to give us a call or send us an email on what their challenges are going to be. But I think we've selected two clients that are kind of very interesting. Their technologies are interesting, but also their transition from technology development to business focus is quite exciting. So we'll turn it over to Chris to talk about these two cases.
Sure. The other interesting thing about these two cases are they were probably within my first 3 months of working with the SBTDC, and they've continued to be clients. These long-term clients it's nice to build such a relationship, as many business counselors understand and know that for themselves. The first one is Cell F Bio, a gentleman named Khalil. He is a researcher. He was a researcher in Michigan and came down to start his business in the Wake Forest area and worked with Wake Forest University. He's in regenerative medicine, and it is there's some really good regenerative medicine laboratories here in Winston-Salem, and I think he wanted to be in that environment. He deals with basically, and this is not an exaggeration, he is rebuilding parts of the digestive system with people's own cells so that they can be treated for things that may not be life-threatening, but they certainly do threaten a normal life, a comfortable life, which is things like incontinence and issues with the throat. He came to us looking for assistance with SBIR, STTR for NIH. Ultimately, he won both and has won the rare some follow-on funding from NIH. He's worked with not only our team, but he's also participated in the summer internship, and he's been a part. This picture is actually from our annual report for the state agency. He was selected to be in it, and he is currently has his development in humans, and they are testing it in humans as we speak. So he's an interesting character. He was well aware he understood business, but he understood he didn't like business. which is nice to have a client be that forthright and understand themselves enough to say, I need help with this, and we're happy to help him. He's a good person. The next client, again, was early in my career, and I want to mention it. John and I have worked, especially with Khalil, worked very closely together. We often co-counsel. This particular client came to us looking for assistance with a National Science Foundation grant. They are a startup out of the Joint School of Nanoscience and Nanoengineering, which is a collaboration between the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and North Carolina A&T. They sought out to seek a problem in the fishing world, which is catching. There's a problem with catching fish to end up catching more fish, and it's not very sustainable. It's not good for the environment. It's very costly. A lot of the oily fish that crab and lobster eat or feed on are also what other animals eat and feed on, including humans. So to be able to develop a bait that did not that was not composed of these feeder fish, is what they're known, is a tremendous help to the environment, but it's a tremendous help to the fishermen as well, because they have to refrigerate these tons of fish that they use for bait. As a matter of fact, this has the same amount of catching power as a pallet full of fish. I don't know the exact correlation there, but you can understand that this can sit on the shelf for years. It's been sitting on my shelf back there for literally years, whereas fish obviously rot and decay and become unusable. They were a participant in the 2016 International Conference on Innovation and Entrepreneurship in China. That was working with our International Business Development Program. Our state is very good with all the programs working together, and inter-team referrals and inter-region referrals are common. And they were also recognized as one of 10 clients throughout the ASBDC system nationwide and in the territories for the ASBDC showcase in 2018, which we were lucky enough to go and watch them receive that recognition, and we're very proud of them. They've worked hard.
Great, thank you, Chris. So when these two clients and any client comes to work with our tech commercialization team, the first thing is to determine if their business and their entity and their ideas are eligible to participate in the SBIR and the STTR programs. The eligibility criteria for the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs are that the entity that submits a proposal and is awarded a grant or contract must be a small business. It has to be under 500 people, because that's the definition of a small business from the Small Business Administration's standpoint. That entity has to be a for-profit business, must be US owned, primarily not institutionally owned, meaning less than 50% owned by equity institutions. And all research that's performed in a phase 1 and a phase 2 SBIR and STTR must be done in the US. That business must have access to a dedicated principal investigator, and that principal investigator, we'll talk about that momentarily, is the headline research specialist, the person with the expertise focused on a particular technology area. That team has to have a very strong principal investigator associated with it. And the technology that the company is interested in working on has to have a fit, a match between what the agency, the funding agency, is looking for and what they're looking to develop. So we'll talk about kind of the ideal SBIR client. And when we talk about ideal, we often don't see ideal clients when they walk in our door. I don't think I've ever seen, and I don't think Chris has ever seen, the perfect client walk through our door, because if they were perfect and they had all their ducks in a row, they probably wouldn't need our assistance. But as we're sitting down with a client, in the backs of our minds, we're thinking about, does this client have the ideal aspects, and what are the gaps? So that's what we're counseling them on, is to become that ideal client when they first come to meet with us. And that the first point of an ideal client goes back to their team. Are they competent? Are they technically competent? Are they technical experts? And are they looking to solve a particular problem? Oftentimes we'll ask a client, specifically, what, thinking, outside the box, let's talk about your own talents, your own expertise, but more importantly, let's talk about your limitations. So we want them to be honest and understanding of what they're bringing to the table and what they're not. So a team, an SBIR program or project is really a team effort. And that team is more than just a principal investigator. That team must include, perhaps not in a phase 1 environment, but certainly going into a phase 2, there must be a business officer, or somebody who's going to be playing the role of the chief executive officer. And there also should be somebody or a team member with the ability to carry out market research, so that they can gain a good understanding of the industry, et cetera. The experience of the team should also include a strong prior innovation and commercialization background. And this often becomes problematic when we're talking with an individual who perhaps is just starting out in his or her career, somebody who just perhaps got their PhD, they're 28, 29, 30 years old, and they just don't have a lot of prior innovation and commercialization skill sets. That person or the team should also have a very strong understanding of the research methodology, because SBIR reviewers are going to be looking very, very stringently at whether they think the team can actually carry out the work that they're suggesting in a proposal. The team should also be recognizing the following facts. They should understand what the product or the service is that they're looking to develop at the end of the project. They should really have a desire to operate a business and not just simply conduct R&D. And it's kind of interesting when we host events, specifically at universities. One of the first things that I ask attendees at their training sessions is, for a raise of hands of how many faculty members actually want to be the CEO of the business that they create to go after an SBI or an STTR proposal. And very, very few of them actually raise their hands. And that's absolutely fine. They understand that they really enjoy and they're very focused and appreciate the R&D aspect of what they're doing, but they know that the business side of things is just not their cup of tea. So that tells us that we really need to work with them to identify individuals who they can bring on their team to focus on that business. They really need to have a strong understanding of the industry that the product is that they're developing. And again, they should have very strong background in managing research projects. So Chris will chat about the not so ideal SBIR client and some of the words that we've heard some of our clients suggest to us.
Yes, of course. There's an old adage that you just can't make this stuff up, and I'm creative, but I did not make this up. These are actual quotes that we have collected over the years we weave them into our presentations as this is the way people think sometimes, and we have to understand that. One, I need funding for a great idea, and I need it soon. This is your typical, I'm looking for a grant, I'm looking for some kind of funding, and they don't really care where it comes from. Plus, you have to question if they have such a great idea, whether they need funding. So those are questions we ask. The second one, here are some ideas I drew on a cocktail napkin. Now, let's be fair. I've also seen construction paper. I've seen people scribble it on actually like a magazine. This shows they probably don't have a good grasp of true research methods. The next one, I don't care about sales. I just need money to get it done. This highlights a problem with their customer discovery and their lack of will to do it. This particular client ended up being an intern in an internship with us, and I got to say it was one of the most interesting internships with me and the intern both, trying to help them understand that understanding who's going to buy the product is, well, it's important. The next one, what do you mean? Who am I selling this thing to? That kind of dovetails in with the previous one. We also coach quite often on understanding not just who's giving you the money, who the end user is, who the other stakeholders are, and oftentimes, especially with biotech and healthcare, those can be 4 or 5 different entities. The next one, there is nothing like this on the market. I have disproved this in 0.03 seconds with a Google search. I was actually taught to disprove this comment by an older counselor in a Google search. It's very effective. We try to explain if there's competition, at least it shows there's a market. So don't be scared that there's nothing out there. And if you're deluded to think there's nothing like that out there, then you're not looking hard enough. Finally, my favorite is my uncle, mom, cousin, pet, ferret, whoever said that I could sell 1 million of these. And my response has been of late, well, you need to consult your uncle, mom, cousin, and your pet ferret for some financing because, or pre-sales. I like pre-sales when it comes to this kind of thing. So anyway, these are actual, and there's, I don't want to downplay the people that said this because they just needed coaching. If everybody was perfect at business, we wouldn't, people wouldn't need us. So, but it is fun, and it does take, it kind of takes them out of the SBIR talk when they come in with this kind of, so we look for other funding methods.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, some of these things that you learn from an initial client engagement really, will help us to steer away from the SBIR and STTR programs, especially comments like, well, I think we only need $20,000 to get this app up and running, or this new widget up and running. It just needs a few tweaks. So, these are, although we put these in this presentation to bring some humor, but these are some key things that we're learning from our clients as we listen to them, that are going to help us steer, in the direction of the counseling that we provide. So what we like to do when we first meet with a company who's thinking about SBIR and STTR is to help them think about the future, thinking about the end goal, right? What is the end goal that they would like to achieve after conducting, a phase 1 and a phase 2, which is going to be 2 to 3 to 4 years of research. And that end goal of the SBIR funding is to, for that business to develop a novel and innovative product or solution that fulfills a significant agency or public need, right? That at the end of the day is what this program is all about. So our first goal is to help our client understand that this is the end goal. And now let's step back to say, here's where we are today. What are the steps that we need to take from where we are today through that 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 year process to get to that end goal? So now that we've helped our clients understand what that end goal is, that product that's going to fulfill some agency or public need that's very innovative, the question is, okay, where do we start now? And most of our clients come to us with the need for funding. So we consider SBIR and STTR as a possible fit for their funding strategy. So the SBIR program is a compilation of 11 federal agencies. There are 11 federal agencies that are required to participate in this program. And these agencies are those that have over $100 million in extramural R&D funding associated with them. Extramural R&D funding is funding that these agencies spend outside of their walls, outside of their own agencies each year. And here you can see the wide variety of 11 federal agencies that participate in the program. Everything from Department of Defense to NIH to USDA, NASA, National Science Foundation, Homeland Security, etc. So the key here is we try to help our clients not feel that they should pigeonhole themselves based on their perhaps lack of understanding of all of the interests within these agencies. So we like to leave our clients in that first initial meeting with them having an open mind as to, wow, there could be a fit between what I'm trying to accomplish with my research and development and perhaps a couple of these different agencies. Clients are often very surprised at the breadth of missions and breadth of areas of interest just within some agencies. Like the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense is almost a catch-all of all types of technologies, as is National Science Foundation. So we like to have them keep an open mind.
Yeah, and to add to that a bit, one thing I think we offer value is we do not write the proposal for the client. They write it themselves, we review it, we help them through it, but I think what we can add some value is helping them understand a strategy, because all of these agencies are going to have different deadlines, they're going to have different criteria, they're going to judge and have different people looking at the proposal. So that's where we can help them stage better, perhaps say, okay, well, the DoD is our first choice on this one, but the National Institutes of Health may have something in January, and then let's go right behind that. Let's not do a one shot with an arrow. We want to keep the arrows coming. And I think that's where we add some value to this, even with somebody who's familiar with writing the process or writing grants.
Exactly. Now, of the 11 agencies that participate in SBIR, there are 6 of them, and these are the 6 largest in terms of that extramural R&D funding that participate in a sister program called Small Business Technology Transfer. And you'll note that the word of business is in Small Business Technology Transfer, but it's somehow omitted in the actual acronym. But business is still a very important component of STTR. So you can see that Department of Defense, NASA, NIH, NSF, and Department of Energy are all participants in both the SBIR and STTR program. And in our work with clients, that's one of the first primary challenges is which of these 2 programs is going to be a better fit with our situation? Is it going to be SBIR or STTR? And I'll just take a moment to state that STTR enables or requires actually at least 30% of the work in a phase 1 project to be carried out at a nonprofit research institution. In most cases, that's a university. Whereas SBIR does not have that requirement that a university participate. The other major difference has to do with the principal investigator's primary employment during the project. For most agencies, now there's always some nuances here, and we're not going to get into those today, but for most agencies, the principal investigator in an SBIR must be majority employed by the small business during the award period. In an STTR, that is not the case. In an STTR, the principal investigator can be majority employed by that university subcontractor. So that opens the doors for faculty members who are interested in participating in this program to still maintain their majority employment status at their university, but still participate in an STTR program.
I think you could, the way I wrapped my brain around this in the beginning, SBIR is all business, may have some connection to academia. STTR is the academia, is academic leaning component to these two programs, even though the small business is a vital, necessary part of it. It's just STTR just makes me think academia. So it's a way to kind of rule it out or figure it out early in the process as you're starting to understand which of these two programs may be the best fit.
And the STTR program started a couple of years after the SBIR program in the 1980s. And the impetus behind the development of STTR was the federal agencies were trying to create a mechanism for technologies that were born in a university environment and move them through a small business out into the marketplace. So it's a kind of a mechanism of transitioning technologies from a university through a small business out to the market. We suggest that our clients think about the agency that they submit an SBIR or an STTR proposal to as the customer of the proposal. And this is kind of a new way of thinking for a lot of clients. And so we're talking about as a client is developing this document that they're going to submit to the agency. That document is really a product in and of itself. And the agency or the reviewers at the agency are the customer of that proposal. They're either going to buy that proposal and fund the project, or they're going to decide not to buy it and not fund the project. So from that standpoint, it's very important for the proposal writer, the small business, to understand this agency customer. And a big part of that understanding is understanding what is that agency's overall mission. Is it focused on safety and security? Is it focused on increasing or promoting public health? Is it for developing products and servicing the warfighter, as in DoD? What is that mission of the agency? That's very critical for a proposal writer or a small business to understand. It's important to understand what are the problems, the very specific problems that those agencies fund. Also, how is that particular agency going to use the innovation that you create through a phase 1 and a phase 2 SBI or STTR? Are they going to use it internally, such as DoD, Department of Defense, which is considered a contract agency? Contract agencies often procure or actually purchase and ultimately use the technology that the small business develops. Other agencies like National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation are considered grant agencies, and those agencies don't actually purchase and use the end technology. They're looking for the small business to take that out into the marketplace themselves. Also, at the end of the day, this SBIR and STTR program was developed on the premise that there are going to be strong economic development benefits that come from it, primarily through business creations, right? Small businesses are helped to get off the ground through this early stage funding. They're going to hire people. There's going to be tax revenue generation, et cetera. So very important to understand what are the goals that the agency is looking to achieve from its mission, the problems that they're focused on solving, and ultimately what is the economic development benefit that they would like to see come from this work.
And another thing that reaches across all of those is this term that if you leave trying to understand anything about SBR, there's a term called degree of technical risk. All of these agencies want something that's technically risky. Now, they may moderate that depending on what problem they need solved, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's what helped me understand the program is when I heard the term, what's the degree of technical risk? And that's something the agencies look for, agencies being the customer in that analogy.
That's right. So digging a little bit deeper into what contract agencies are and what the opportunities are that exist. Great examples of contract agencies are the Department of Defense, NASA, and Homeland Security. These agencies offer very, very specific solicitations, or in other words, requests for proposals. And the technical specifications or the needs that they're seeking to fulfill are very well defined in their solicitations. There's not a lot of room for flexibility. So if a company identifies a solicitation that's a perfect match for what their technical development interests are, go ahead and submit. If it's just a so-so match and you kind of have to weave your way into fitting it, probably not a great idea to submit a proposal in that case. And again, these agencies are likely to be the end buyer and the user of the technology. So for example, the Department of Defense and the Air Force might be seeking out a very specific component of a new radar system that they're developing. If the small business through an SBIR and STTR is able to successfully develop that radar component, that component is probably going to fit into some larger system that the Air Force is going to be implementing out in the field. It's really it's we'll say difficult, time-consuming to dig deep into these agencies to really figure out what their areas of interest are. Within the Department of Defense, they have technical points of contact. They have program managers, and these individuals are not necessarily that easy to find. There's not a simple website that you can go to identify all of the people that you can reach out to. It takes some time to figure out who are the technical points of contact at these various agencies. But it's very important to do that so that you can gain an understanding of what does Air Force have an interest in, what is their problem. With contract agencies, there's also a limited window of communication between solicitation release and when the proposals are due, what the proposal deadline dates are. So we help to work with clients to understand what is that window, what is the proper communication that should be had between business and agency, and what kind of questions to ask. And also reviewers of SBIR and STTR proposals at contract agencies are internal government employees. They're actual people, on the ground at Department of Defense or at NASA or at Homeland Security, which is very different than the other school of agencies, which is the grant school of agencies. Grant agencies, some primary examples of those are Health and Human Services, which NIH is a big part of, National Science Foundation, and USDA. Now, their solicitations that they publish are very, very broad. There is indeed a lot of room for flexibility and creativity when developing a proposal and suggesting the technology that you're going to create is going to be a fit for what their interests are. So unlike contract agencies, grant agencies, as we mentioned earlier, they are not going to be the ultimate user or the buyer of what you develop. It's up to you, the small business or the businesses that we're working with, to identify who the customers are and to access that customer base. So very important to understand that end user, that customer or buyer's needs. With grant agencies, there's an open window of communication. There's no kind of blackout periods where you can't communicate as with contract agencies. And the reviewers of grant proposals are external. These are individuals that the agencies have put together. Both Chris and I are actually have participated on grant review panels. So we're not agency employees. So they are seeking out experts in particular areas, particular technical and business areas, to come in and provide a critical review of both the science and the business concepts in the proposals that are submitted to them. So very, very different needs, requirements, sets of interests between contract and grant agencies. And again, that's one of the major things that we'll counsel our clients on is, all right, now that we've identified a handful of agencies, how do they work? Are some grant agencies, some contract agencies, and the kind of the path that we help to lay out for each of them is going to be very, very different. So as we're assisting a client to get started in developing a proposal, again, we always come back to who is the team that the business has put together. What are the competencies that they have? What types of research background do they have? What kinds of problems and technical risks have they taken so far in their career? One of the major things that will kind of guide clients through, and especially as a client is going through this for the first time, it's scary, to put it quite frankly. There are a lot of things that they need to look at, and oftentimes they just don't know where to start. So one of the first pieces of homework that we give to our clients is asking them to, of course, look at all of the agencies, keeping an open mind, and looking at open solicitations to see what kinds of areas of interest that these agencies have. We also highly recommend looking at previous awards. Previous awards being SBIRs and STTRs that have been funded over the last 5 or 10 years. SBIR.gov is a terrific website that the SBA actually runs, and they have a very, very detailed database of all SBIRs and STTR awards that have been made, I think actually since the beginning of the program. So we can walk through with our clients based on keywords for their technology area of interest, and see actually the abstract and the company information that was funded. So that is going to give our clients a good idea of which agency has funded particular ideas, and more importantly, what perhaps was the technical risk that was being proposed in these projects.
I'm sorry. Well, I think the thing that we all push about the previous awards as well is there will be clients come in and they're very qualified. They have great ideas, but it's just not a package. It's a component. It's a sensor. It's an element. It's some piece of raw material that they've developed. It's a great innovation. Well, in these previous awards, maybe somebody to collaborate with that needs that sensor or that piece of raw material that's specialized. And if somebody's already been funded, that's a great person to partner with because they know the process. And maybe it's even an opportunity to collaborate on a future SBR. So I think it's one of those situations where we coach going to SBIR for people who may not be perfect for it, hoping that they may find a match with somebody who has been awarded. So in addition to all the things John mentioned.
Yeah, that's a terrific point, and kind of a concept that we feel that is heavily underutilized, is looking at companies that have received previous awards and looking at them as potential partners. That's often something that we strongly suggest to some of our clients. Speaking with agency program staff, very, very important. Of course, looking at the open timeline windows that agencies offer is important. But a lot of companies don't take the opportunity to actually have kind of a technically focused call with that agency. And again, the agency is the customer of your proposal. And when you look at it like that, if you don't actually communicate with your customer, things are going to be not so great. And then finally, we'll sit down and kind of map out a timeline and a funding strategy with our clients, just to show them, this is not something that you can complete in a week. This is going to be a long-term strategy for you, and we want to lay out all of the different elements. So with that, we look at a number of sources of capital as they may fit in with R&D companies. First is non-dilutive funding. SBIR and STTR fits into that. There's dilutive funding, which is generally equity capital based, and then there's some alternative sources that can be very important as well, and we'll talk about those momentarily now. So non-dilutive capital is often the place that we start with our clients. The goal of non-dilutive capital is to allow the business or the developer of intellectual property to maintain ownership of whatever they develop. So in the case of SBIR and STTR agencies, they are not going to maintain ownership of the technologies. Of course, some agencies are going to maintain a right to use the technology, but that is not giving up ownership of the technology. And typically non-dilutive grants are kind of fall within the buckets of grants, contracts, and other challenge type awards. So the big pros, the big positives about SBIR and STTR is that it's free money. Okay, it's not easy money. It can be expensive in terms of the time it takes to develop a strong proposal and do all of the due diligence. But the big part of this is that this is funding that can come in at times where the technology is still so high risk, still so untested, that other funding mechanisms are not going to be attracted to yet. The downsides of non-dilutive capital is that the funds are sometimes restrictive. There's government red tape, a lot of forms, a lot of registrations, a lot of waiting that needs to be done. And it can certainly be relatively highly competitive. Now with the SBIR and STTR programs, competition rates are quite attractive still. With phase ones, they're about 15 to 20%, and phase twos can be 40 to 50%. So although competitive, not as competitive as a lot of other grant mechanisms out there. Now, dilutive capital can come in perhaps a little bit later stage in the technology development realm. It can come in when generally a company is close to or has achieved revenue growth. Typically, equity capital comes from the entrepreneur themselves. It can come from friends and family and coworkers. It can come from angel investors and venture capitalists. And each of these different buckets of equity funding providers is going to bring with them their own level of risk tolerance. So certainly the entrepreneur themselves, if they're looking to bring or put funding into a project, they're going to be pretty tolerant to a lot of risk. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, a venture capitalist, no, they're not very, they're quite risk averse actually. They're almost looking for a sure thing. So equity capital, I'd say, is much more competitive than other non-dilutive mechanisms. So you can see in the image here, the example of 100 business plans will be submitted to an equity investor like an angel or a venture capitalist. They'll go through the review. 10 of them will be decided to look quite promising. They'll get a closer look taken at them. Those 10 will go through what's called the process of due diligence. And out of that original 100, one of them might get funded. So very competitive. But at the end of the day, what they're looking for is a significant return on investment. They're looking for best case scenario, the sure thing, to help turn their initial funding into a 10 times return, right? So very important to understand that these are generally risk averse type funders. And then finally, there are a number of alternatives that fit in between the lines here. There is debt funding, which is your general taking out a loan. In North Carolina, there are a number of state agencies and pseudo government agencies that offer loan funds at attractive terms. So the North Carolina Biotechnology Center is one of those entities that will offer loan funding. Revenue can be looked at as a potential funder. Oftentimes we'll work with our clients to suggest that they offer two lines of business. One of them being this R&D side of the business where they're looking at SBIRs and STTRs, but the other side of the business could be more revenue generation, perhaps through consulting engagements, selling existing product lines, et cetera. So companies can dump revenue back into their business to fund these gaps. There's equity exchange for services. A good example of that would be legal expenses. So companies that are in the innovation space, they're going to need to utilize legal services, primarily wrapped around intellectual property protection. There are a good number of lawyers out there who understand that early stage companies aren't going to have $10,000 or $20,000 to pay their fees, so they may be willing to take an equity stake in that business as kind of an upfront payment for their services. And then certainly looking at licensing and partnerships and collaborations, those are potential funding mechanisms as well. And we've kind of tied all of those funding mechanisms into this this graphic here, where kind of the spectrum is very high risk on the left side of the screen, where SBIR phase ones come into play. You're generating ideas, you're testing feasibility. You move on to phase two, which is prototype development, field testing, getting the product into the hands of users. And then when you're on the cusp of or are achieving revenue, you can move on to equity and other follow-on funding mechanisms. And of course, the alternative sources or that we just mentioned can kind of fill in the gaps as they come up in the spectrum.
Well, and I think it's important to note too that a company cannot yet be a company and apply for one of these grants, but they must be a company to accept the award. And why that relates to that chart that John put up is because typically they think about, sometimes the companies think about the SBIR as being their initial pot of money that they're going to run off of, and they fail to plan this parallel path, I understand that's a lot of P's. They fail to plan this parallel path of funding that they're going to need, because there's just gaps between 1 and 2. And without, that's something we try to help them understand is, as we're going through this, we can't just focus on the SBIR. We have to focus on the gaps.
Absolutely. And gaps are going to come up when you least expect them. So identifying how you're going to fill those ahead of time, extremely important. So coming back to team development, very important to work with your clients to determine who do they currently have as it stands right now on their team. Is it just one individual, the principal investigator? Very important to understand who they're going to need, right? So as Chris mentioned, you don't have to be set up as a company at the time that you're developing your proposal, but you do have to be set up as a company at the time that you submit. So you don't need, and you don't need to have all of the team members employed, even at the time that you submit your proposal. You do have to be able to suggest that they are lined up and are ready to become employees of your business at the time of the award. So you do have this kind of cushion of not having to bring all of these employees or all of these team members into play just to submit a proposal. But very important nonetheless to understand what the needs are, what the gaps are, when you're going to need to bring them on, and how you're going to compensate them. Can they all be compensated through the SBIR or STTR funding? Or are you going to have to be using, one of those alternative methods to be able to compensate them? So in terms of the internal team, very, very important that the research and development team, the team that's going to be actually conducting the research and development that you're proposing in your phase 1 and phase 2 proposal, must be rock solid. The reviewers are going to be looking at that very, very closely. And the R&D team is going to be composed of again, that principal investigator, kind of that rock star technical expert, the person that's kind of done this type of work before. But also surrounding that principal investigator would be key scientific members, people that are going to be bringing in very specific skill sets that principal investigator may not have. Also an advisory board. Advisory boards oftentimes are unpaid positions in a very early stage company. So understanding, what are the skill sets that we need to bring on an advisory board, specifically a scientific advisory board, is very important. And then on the other side of the house, the business side of the house, the commercial side of the house, very important at some point, again, not important to have necessarily at the time of phase 1 submission, but definitely important to have at the time of phase 2 is, who is the CEO? Who's going to be the person who's overseeing our business development activities? Who's going to play that role? Best case scenario is that you can have somebody step in who's been in a situation like this before, who's commercialized technologies in the past. We often refer to them as serial entrepreneurs. But if you can't find that person, like in one of our case studies with the organobait company, they had an individual who is kind of a serial entrepreneur who was able to step in and take that finished product out into the marketplace. Again, advisory board, important to have expertise that you can quickly call upon. And oftentimes, individuals on the business side of things, the CEO, for example, they don't have to be full-time. They can be fractional, they can be part-time, so that there's a lot of flexibility as to, again, how you compensate them and how you fit them into the team. But very important to have both sides of the house covered, R&D and business team in place. Now, when it comes to, we call them kind of the external teams, the subcontractor side of things. We often suggest that after looking critically at the internal team, be thinking about what are kind of third parties that can come in to fill in the gaps. Oftentimes, those can be universities, they can be other small businesses, and those individuals or entities really are going to bring in expertise and credibility that, again, you don't have necessarily in-house yet as a very early stage company. And again, the bottom line, you don't need to be a fully staffed business to be a successful business. Okay, you just need to, in a proposal, suggest that you have access to these individuals and access to their expertise, and that's going to go a long way in building the credibility of your team. So these are the things that we often really try to nail home with the clients that we work with. So building the business case around technology development efforts can be very, very trying and very almost threatening to some of the clients that we've worked with. And one of our biggest things that we try to do is we need to be empathetic, because a lot of the times this is a client's first time in starting to move outside of that research and development box into the business world. So being empathetic, understanding what they don't know, and really being, conscious about, that this is their first time. Very important to do for business counselors.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we smile and we kind of remember fondly these people that with the quotes and all earlier in the presentation. But what ends up happening with this particular program is you have some absolutely brilliant people coming to talk to us, and they are not accustomed to not understanding and knowing things, and there's things that they just haven't been around and they may not know and understand. So the empathy, even with the person with the cocktail napkin, all the way up through the person with the PhD that has patents, our agency really tries to push a program called the Trusted Advisor, and it is quite frankly, it's if you've been doing it a while, it seems common sense, but it's nice to know that you're doing it correctly. If you're doing it correctly, if that makes sense. And if you're not, the Trusted Advisor is a refresher on how to be empathetic and how to gain trust and how to be a partner in it with the client, even though you have no money in it. Our success is a result of their success. And that dovetails in with walking the client through the process, the market understanding, the competitive assessments, the commercial strategies. I like the one-page canvas, business canvas model. I always get them inverted, but I certainly like the tool. I think it helps get people to thinking about things they weren't thinking about a business, because the logos and the names and the innovations are all great and fun, but there's a lot of other stuff about running a business than the fun parts, as we know. And I would like to take this next bullet because John developed a very, very good internship program through the SBTDC technology commercialization team. And those students provide a lot of resources from a business perspective. They're graduate, MBA, but it may be management of engineering, management of science, but they understand management and business, and they are paired with clients a lot of times who are working on SBIR or STTR, and they bring a different perspective to the table and can help them with the commercialization strategies and some of the other things that aren't as comfortable for these very smart people to do. And so we all applaud John on that program, but I'm glad he did it, because I certainly enjoyed mentoring the students and watching them help our clients as well. So I'll hand it back to you, John.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, that program has been we look at it as being, another set of hands that these entrepreneurs can use to really delve deeply into the business concepts that they need to be thinking about, especially as they're starting to develop a phase 2 proposal. Before we step off this slide, I'll also mention that it's really, really fun when we meet with a client the first time who almost is an expert in all of the things that we're advising on. And one case comes to mind. He's a surgeon at Duke University. And, as we're discussing his technology, he's laying out all of the things, the timelines, the industry, the market need. And I said, you've done this a few times before, right? And he said, nope, first time. My life has been, doing surgery, doing hernia surgeries and shoulder surgeries. And so there are people who kind of, I don't know if it's innately or what, but they really can embrace the prospects, the business prospects, really early on. And then there's the clients who are a little bit resistant to the business side of things. So again, we're almost part psychologists. We need to listen really well as business counselors, see where our clients are coming from, and work with them at their pace. So, kind of stepping back to what Chris was mentioning about our graduate internship program, this is one of the major thrusts of that program each summer is linking these interns with companies that have generally gone through a phase 1 SBIR and are now working on a phase 2 commercialization plan, and assisting with primary market research and secondary market research. Again, very, very time-consuming topics to delve into for an already busy entrepreneur. But just to touch on them briefly, secondary market research, very important for an early stage company to carry out. Secondary market research is using existing market reports, articles, documents, etc., information that's already been collected from other resources to help you get a good understanding of your industry. At the SBTDC here in North Carolina, we do have a market research staff member who's dedicated to working on things like that. But also, we often refer clients to universities, and again, the North Carolina Biotechnology Center that has a dedicated market research library specifically for life sciences. So if you're not familiar with the resources that can help with market research tasks in your state, it would be a good lesson for you and your teams to look into those opportunities. And then primary market research, that's actually stepping out and making the dreaded cold calls to potential customers to understand what is it that they need in a product that you're developing. Again, very time consuming, a lot of non-responses when you're going out to collect information. But if you can bring other sources in, like students or consultants, to assist with this, very, very good idea to do so.
Yeah, and I think it's also people just generally don't like seeking out feedback that's going to be negative. I mean, that's just a human nature. So, but I will tell people that going into business is risky. It's like this, and what we're trying to do is narrow that risk down through this primary research. And with the example of my uncle said that people will buy me in these. Prove your uncle right. I would love for you to find 500 people that prove your uncle right, because we would much rather see you receive critical information that you don't like than to see you spend 100,000, 200 of your savings on a business that customers aren't going to be responsive to. So.
Exactly. So competition, very important to understand who your competitors are. Understanding of your competitors is going to only increase the credibility in the eyes of proposal reviewers or equity investors. And even more importantly, not showing competition is going to really be a red flag. So don't forget, competitors could also be potential partners. So just as we were referring to the SBIR.gov website, in looking at other companies that have been awarded SBIRs in your area of interest, sure, they're competitors, they're building technologies that are going to be competing against yours, but look at it from the half glass full perspective as well, and that, well, wow, maybe we could partner and make each other's lives better, and ultimately the technology that we're developing even stronger. So the commercialization pathway, as we're continuing to work with our clients, and perhaps now that they've gotten a phase 1 SBIR, they've identified some equity funding, we need to continue to help them think about, what does that commercialization pathway look like? What is the route that they as a business are going to be taking to get that end product out into the marketplace? And oftentimes we'll suggest to clients that the plan that they put in place probably is not going to be the plan that actually happens, because you're putting this commercialization plan together way in advance. A lot of things can change as you're going through the R&D process. So it's almost as if they're kind of writing a fictitious plan of action. But what's important is that there is a significant thought process that went into the development of this plan of action. And that's what reviewers of SBIR phase 2s are going to be looking at. That's what equity investors are going to be looking at when they're doing your due diligence on a business plan. So keeping them apprised of the, keep the end in mind philosophy, very important. Keep your eye on the prize, keep your eye on the product at the end of the project. And a couple of ways they can proceed into the commercial marketplace is making a decision as to, are they going to license this technology to a third party? And that third party is going to, take that technology and run and get it to the marketplace, or would they prefer to do everything in-house? Some technologies, especially those in the pharmaceutical fields and biotech fields, oftentimes it's not the small business that does the initial development. That's the one that carries it out. Generally, it's one of the large pharma companies that will kind of swoop in at some point in the development process and kind of take the baton and run with it out to the marketplace. So depending on the industry, licensing might be kind of one of the only routes to go, or in other industries, doing things in-house might be the best method. And then, helping the client understand, well, in 5 or 10 years, you're an entrepreneur, you've built this business. What do you want that business to look like? What do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to simply focus on R&D? You license your technology after it's developed, and then you move on to the next kind of novel, innovative thing, and that's what you do, is R&D, and get these novel ideas to the point where others are going to come in and license them. Do you want to be a manufacturer? Do you want to create these widgets and sell them? Do you want to be the sales and distribution channel? So understanding, all of the intricacies of each of these methods of commercialization is very important. But really helping your client to again, look forward and say, what do I want to be when I grow up? And then what's the pathway for us to get there? That's very important for us as business counselors to understand. And then as we wrap up our presentation today, there are, of course, many, many legal considerations that an early stage tech company must consider. Now, it's important to remember that Chris and I and most of the individuals at the SBTDC are not attorneys. We're not experienced in providing legal advice, but we do maintain a strong list of referrals, particularly of service providers who are adept at working with entrepreneurs. There are a lot of lawyers, a lot of intellectual property attorneys out there, but at least in North Carolina, there's a small handful that really focus on early stage companies, understand the challenges that they're facing, and that's their business. So we maintain a list of good referrals that we can provide to clients that are in need. We have a strong understanding of the university tech transfer kind of policies and individuals within the many universities here in North Carolina, so that we can provide referrals back to them if our clients are from a university and they have not yet communicated with the tech transfer office. So keeping abreast of who's who in that world is very important. And as it relates to SBIR and STTR, universities also have very strong conflict of interest policies that they require proposals to work through. So maintaining a list of who those individuals are and what the nuances are is very important.
Now, I think it should be mentioned that one of the quickest way to have an SBIR proposal dismissed is not having a clear explanation in it of how the intellectual property is protected, who owns it, who's got it licensed, and who has the freedom to operate with it. So we try to counsel from a business standpoint on IP, and that's going to segue into John's next slide.
So the SBTDC has at least for 1 or 2 decades maintained a very comprehensive intellectual property protection guide, which is available for download. It's available at the link provided on the screen. Feel free to refer to this. Very easy to understand document. And if your organization, doesn't have a publication like this, you may want to consider developing something that does cover these topics. This document is also very applicable to companies that are not necessarily even in the technology space. It covers a lot about trademarks, copyrights, etc. So very relevant document for pretty much all of the clients that we as an organization see on a day-to-day basis. So we invite you to check out that document. Very well done. So in closing, some of the key takeaways from our session today are it's very important to understand the profile of the client that you're working with and identifying do they or do they not fit the eligibility requirements as it relates to SBIR and STTR and even equity funding. And if they don't fit those eligibility requirements, what can be done so that they do fit them? We provide a very strong, detailed overview of the SBIR program to those clients that fit that mold. We walk them through how to go through the solicitation search process. We clearly understand that SBIR isn't and should not be the only funding mechanism that a tech company should be seeking. SBIR is never, ever going to be the only mechanism of funding that can take a company from idea through commercialization. There's always going to be other mechanisms that have to fit in, and helping them to understand the challenges and timelines associated with that is very important. Team development. Be asking our clients to be extremely honest with themselves about what is their level of expertise and who do they know that they can bring on board to fill those gaps from both an R&D and a business standpoint. Very important. Customer understanding. Very important that the client, again, keep that end in mind, keep that product, that thing they're developing in the backs of their minds, and understanding who is the customer, who's going to be the buyer, who's going to be the user, who's going to be the decision maker, and working toward all of those different parties' needs as they're developing their technology is extremely important. Product, again, what is the value proposition? And finally, commercialization pathway. What are, we've got a lot of different paths that we can go down. Perhaps the path that we initially lay out is not going to be the path that is ultimately followed, but at least we're thinking about all the alternatives and what the ins and outs of those pathways are is very important. So here, we've given you a kind of a snapshot of the work that we do with clients over an extended engagement. We work with clients, some we'll work with for a couple of hours a year. Some clients will work with, especially when we're working through a summer intern, we might work with them for 300 hours a year. So hopefully we've given you a snapshot of all of the things that we do and can do, and you should be considering as you're working with companies in the technology space. So certainly we invite you to reach out to, both of us, reach out at any time. We're kind of teachers and guidance counselors at heart, so we're happy to have a follow-up call with anybody if you'd like to chat a little bit more about what we do. Any closing comments from you, Chris?
Well, I'll reiterate, please reach out to us. I think part of the ASBDC network that's appealing to us is understanding how people do things in different states. One of our tech team members is at NorCal SBDC as a director there, and actually helped us write the intellectual property guide. So I think reaching out to us just to say, hey, how's it going? So we can start a rapport with people like us in other states is interesting. We can't meet in person this year, but we can certainly continue conversation virtually. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for joining us for an hour and a half today. And we look forward to perhaps seeing you next time around when the ASBDC conference comes back live and in person. So thanks for joining us.